Croeso bawb, welcome everybody, and thank you for coming today. We're here to celebrate Fairtrade Fortnight. Fairtrade Fortnight is an annual celebration of fair trade achievements, and we get to learn more about the difference that fair trade makes. And this year we're talking all about climate justice, and in Wales we're having a specific focus on clothing and fashion. So we're going to be talking about those things today with some very interesting people that we've gathered together. So I'm going to ask each person to introduce themselves and say what they do. And first, I'm going to go to Ranga.
Good morning. Thanks, Aileen. I'm Sri Ranga Rajan, or Ranga. I'm the founder CEO of Dibella India. We are a sustainable supply chain or manufacturer. We work with about 2,700 small-scale cotton farmers, and we train them on organic farming, and then we support them with all the farming activities, and then we take the cotton, convert that into a garment in our one of the most sustainable factories that you could find, and export it to brands like Koolkompany and a few other brands in Scandinavia.
Brilliant, thank you. Jane.
Hello, I'm Jane Hutt and I'm the Minister for Social Justice in the Welsh Government. So I'm responsible for everything that relates to equalities and also tackling poverty, making sure that we are always moving forward in terms of sustainability, very much linked to our commitment to the well-being of future generations. In fact, we were the first country to have legislation, which is now 5-6 years on, the well-being of future generations, which has to underpin every decision that's made by the Welsh Government and public bodies in Wales. I'm responsible for Wales and Africa, and I'm also responsible for refugees and asylum seekers, because Wales is a nation of sanctuary, and we've been welcoming refugees and asylum seekers for decades, but particularly over the last 6 months from Afghanistan, over the last few years from Syria. But also I'm responsible for the third sector, for civil society, and for tackling violence against women, domestic abuse and sexual violence. I mean, really a lot in my portfolio where we've had to work very hard to tackle inequalities that have arisen and deepened as a result of the coronavirus pandemic.
Thank you, Jane. It's brilliant. Andy.
Thank you, Aileen. Good morning, everyone. So Andy Ashcroft is my name, co-founder and managing director of a company called Sgwrs. We're an ethical clothing company, mainly selling to the schools and universities markets. Everything we do, all the clothes that we manufacture through Dibella and the Dibella chain is made with a combination of fair trade organic cotton and mainly recycled polyester. We have two ways that we work with, for example, schools, which is our main market. Obviously, we sell fair trade uniform to those schools that want to embrace fair trade in their school uniforms. But we also go into all of our client schools and we deliver fair trade assemblies, class sessions and so on. And we think it's very important that the students wearing fair trade clothes understand why their schools have made the ethical clothing choice. So that's really what we're all about.
Brilliant, that's great. And it's lovely to have you all here today. I am Aileen, I'm the head of Fairtrade Wales, and Fairtrade Wales aims to support, grow and promote the fair trade movement in Wales. So we work with people in Wales, fair trade communities, shops, schools, universities, who are raising awareness of fair trade and buying and selling it within Wales. And we are part of the Hub Cymru Africa Partnership, which is funded by Welsh Government as part of the Wales and Africa programme. So that's what we are. We have Fairtrade Fortnight coming up, and this is what part of this conversation is today. So we're going to be talking a lot about clothing and its impact on the climate. So fashion contributes 8 to 10% of global carbon emissions worldwide, and just under 20% of the world's wastewater. So I think it'd be interesting interesting to hear from Ranga first, to ask you, obviously you work in the clothing industry, from the cotton all the way through to making the clothes and shipping them. Sort of, what are some of the biggest environmental impacts that a lot of these things are producing?
I think fashion has been in the news for a very long time, from the time people started talking about climate change. So when you look at cotton cultivation, cotton uses by far the largest amount of pesticide. Like globally, the arable land used for cotton cultivation is only about 9%, but almost about 17 to 21% of the pesticide used is for cotton cultivation. So these are class A cancer-causing pesticides, which means it not only has a severe impact on the health of the farmers, but also the health of the soil. So it degrades the soil, it leads to soil erosion, then water doesn't retain water, and leads to plethora of other issues. And then of course cotton consumes, I won't say it is one of the worst offender, but still cotton consumes a lot of cotton for cultivation. So this combination of this, and then what farmers are going through in terms of genetical modification of seeds, and the control on big companies that they have on the seed distribution chain, making it extremely difficult for the cotton farmers to sustain their normal livelihood. And then you add this climate change impact, which they are really far away from how people are consuming and the way they are consuming and how they are discarding. It is not really in the farmers' process, but they have to face the impact first head on. So overall, if you look at it, clothing as a commodity or as a fashion chain, it has significant the portion of its production and how it is converted. It is involved with directly involved with climate change or environmental impact. And then when it comes to social impact, of course, it is the slave labors and bonded labors and low income the low income countries that are producing the garments, where the working conditions are not very good. So there is other plethora of issues as well. So yes, clothing fashion chain has it is creating a lot of environmental and social footprint that could be better. Like, I come from cotton farming family. My fathers and grandfather are small scale cotton farmers. So I have seen death and despair from very close quarters. But I have also seen opportunities, for the brands to do the right thing. And, you don't have to be a massive corporate to make changes in people's lives. You can be a small business supplying to school uniforms, or business supplying T-shirts, or it can be supplying bags to stores. Still, you can contribute significantly to the betterment of environment as well as the people working in the chain.
Thank you. That's really lovely to hear the hope in what can be happening and these sorts of things. Yeah, that's really nice. You talked a lot there about kind of social aspect and climate aspect together. So Jane, I'm wondering what you see the connections between sort of social justice and climate justice. You talked about a huge number of things you have in your portfolio as Social Justice Minister. Sort of, how do you see those things all connect together?
Well, it's just so interesting and important to hear from Ranga about your work in India. It's inspirational. And I think, as Aileen has said, Fairtrade Fortnight is a real opportunity for us to raise awareness. Schools, I think in the next couple of weeks, I'll be judging a competition amongst our schools locally. In the constituency I serve, all the children get involved, and I'd really love to share this with them. I think this will be a good recording, because we very much believe, I've mentioned our well-being of future generations, in global citizenship, and we need to learn from you, because one of the things, just in terms of sort of the link to climate justice and social justice, is that we know that and particularly from COP26 and for all the learning that we've done, and we continue to do, we have a Minister for Climate Change in our government. That the Western world has done the greatest damage to our planet, and the countries that are suffering the most, the ones who've caused the least harm. That message came over so strongly, didn't it, at COP26. And, you know, we've had our history and legacy of the South Wales coalfield, which employed so many people for generations. That's gone now, but we still, you know, we still have we still have a longer legacy footprint, particularly now wanting to address that. So what we have done with our Wales and Africa link, we have now got a commitment to climate change in Africa with an Mbali tree programme. And this is where local people are growing trees, and Mount Elgon Agroforestry Communities Cooperative form our Mbali tree planting programme. We're funding that. Of course, interestingly, Wales, the Welsh Government, isn't responsible for international development, but we have decided to put a proportion of our money into international development because we believe that's should be our commitment, and we plan to plant, to help 25 million trees are going to be planted in an area the size of Wales, the geographical size of Wales, by 2025. I think one question I was going to ask and consider is, you know, how women play a part in your business, because obviously fashion is very important to everybody, but one could say possibly there's a stereotype there that most interested by young women, young girls and women, but increasingly it's not gender specific at all. But I think we're very keen to support women's leadership as part of my social justice agenda. So we have, for example, supported a woman coffee grower, and it'd be interesting to know if you have women leading any of your businesses. So we have a Jennifer's Coffee, which we are funding. It's a partnership between a Fairtrade shop in Cardiff and Ferrari's coffee roasters in Wales, in a little town called Pontyclun, the Wales Cooperative Centre, and the Ugandan coffee growers, and very much led by women in Uganda with our support here. And in fact, Jennifer did attend COP26 and gave some very inspirational talks about her work in climate justice. So we, you know, I think we want to learn more. I think in schools would be very, very keen to learn more about how, you know, the links between what you're doing, the product you're making. And I obviously am very supportive of Andy's business as well. I don't know if you've broken into Wales yet, Andy. We'll hear from you in a short time. But to understand more, it's such an important part for me for education, because one of the things I finally say is that we try and work in our government with all ministers. There's so much that actually crosses over. It's not just, I'm not just the only minister relevant to this conversation. Our education minister would be very interested in it. Our economy minister would be very interested in it as well. Our climate change minister clearly would be very interested. So we will share this recording with all those ministers, because it will highlight, you know, the economic, the educational, the social justice. That's the kind of ethos of our government in Wales, which became the first fair trade nation back in 2008. We have a long way to go, because you can always, as a government and a politician, you can say you believe in all these things, you want these things to happen, you want Wales to be a fully fair trade nation, but you can't, it won't happen unless you work at it. That's where sustainability comes in, because, you know, we politicians will come and go. We have to drive this through every aspect of life, business, private, public sector in Wales, to actually make it work for future generations, and to show a real commitment. So, you know, for me, there's some examples of the way we're linking what you're doing. Very, you know, very, very important. We have a very strong Indian links, particularly, I say, with the British Association, the Physicians of Indian Origin and Nurses of Indian Origin. So I'm doing a great deal of work on health and well-being as well, with partners in India. But anyway, I've probably said enough now to move on to other questions and hear more from other participants.
So Ranga, Jane asked a question about women's leadership and women, so maybe you could talk about that.
Yeah. So, Jen, thank you very much. I think it is really inspiring to see the kind of work you're doing, especially from the government part, and 24 million trees. It's really fabulous when the trees grow, and in 6 years, 7 years down the line, people will really feel the real impact of these trees and what it could do to the environment. And I don't know if we can reverse the climate change, but I think, yeah, that it will contribute a lot for that. So thanks for sharing that information. So in terms of what we do, our women's role in our business, our factory is, which Andy has visited a few times. We have about 500 workers. Out of that, about 93% are women. And we located the factory in a officially declared as backward region, where most of the women are victims of alcoholic abusive husbands or brothers or relatives, and they don't have any other income generating opportunities. So they go to big cities like Chennai or Bangalore and work as housemaids and go through all kind of abuses. So our idea was to create or to train them on tailoring and provide employment opportunity for them, so that they don't have to get out of their town, and they can live a decent life, because we will be providing much higher than the minimum wage, and also we will give a good working condition. And that is how we have started. And for us, one, what is the impact it is making on the community. And it's been 3.5 years that our factory is up and running, and we get such a high quality input from these semi-literate women. It is really unbelievable for us, in terms of how to even to run the business, how we can reduce the quality rejections, and how we can make the workplace better. And a lot of times, they give suggestions on what improvement can be done on the product, which is, when you have a industry attrition of about, for garment industry in India, attrition rate is about 12% per month. And we get an attrition of about 1 to 2% per year. So, which is, we are quite pleased with, the contribution that they're making, as well as what we are. This is we can't be more pleased than, what we have done in terms of business. As a business, it makes a lot of sense, because, our rejections have gone down, our reworks have gone down, our margin has really become better. And for the community, it's a good working conditions, very good salary. And so we see the real impact of, once you provide these opportunities, even if they are not fully literate, the contribution they can make in making the business better. So the women's role is integral part of our business, and without them, we won't be existing right now. And they are part of our day-to-day business. We don't look at them and us. It is really all of us are together in this. And and even at the farm level, like we have started with one is organic, which is good, which is focusing on input, but we are looking at regenerative organic farming practices, which is focused on soil health and which is focused on biodiversity, not really just the input. And I strongly believe, at least having worked in this sustainability space for almost 20 years, that it could be real viable solution for reversing the climate change. And when we started research, talking about regenerative organic farming practices, our women farmers are the one first jumped onto it. They said, yes, this is how, I have seen farming done, and especially, most of the women farmers above 55, 60, they immediately caught onto it. There is no hesitation at all. And then they started pushing us and telling us, okay, what will be the positive impact of regenerative organic farming? So yeah, we are now the largest regenerative organic cotton certified farm globally. We have about 900 farmers certified for regenerative organic farming. Out of that 900, I would say about 570 are women farmers. And I'm, after all my interactions for the first year, now they are not going to go back because they have already started seeing the benefit of practicing, focused on soil health, focused on biodiversity, insects, and multi-cropping. So they started after 2 harvests. They said, this is really how farming should be done. And the best thing about is, the soil health is so good, it started absorbing carbon. The carbon content of the soil is increased by more than 40% in just about 7 months. And which is really, and this is giving more and more hope to us that this could be a real viable solution for reversing climate change. And women play a significant part in getting us to this stage.
It's amazing.
Thank you. Great.
Thank you.
What a really inspiring story.
Diolch, that's amazing. Yeah. It's really lovely to hear, like you said, the difference between the kind of regenerative organic farming and about the soil rather than just the inputs and the fertilizers that are going on it, particularly as the beginning of this conversation was all about the impact, the numbers of pesticides that conventional cotton uses. And also you talked about GM seeds a lot. Now I know in the fair trade system, GM seeds are not normally allowed in the GM system, no, in the fair trade system. So I was just wondering how kind of fair trade for the cotton farmers is important and kind of the differences that makes as well.
I mean, for me, Fairtrade, I was working in Fairtrade for a long time. I was heading cotton in Fairtrade. So, of course, there is a fair price and, there is a Fairtrade minimum price and there is a Fairtrade premium that goes into investing in the community. But for me, coming from, as a farmer's farming background, I would say this, the real impact of Fairtrade is organizing the farmers into a society or into a group. So otherwise, they do not get opportunities to organize themselves. They are fragmented. And when you are fragmented, when you're having, 1 acre, 1 hectare maximum, you do not have any you do not have any inspiration or even any kind of a voice to go and talk to your local council or even to the companies to buy seeds. You do not have any voice really. But when you form into a group, when you organize yourself into a cooperative, then you have a real voice. Then you start looking at, okay, what do I need for my community? And what do I need to ensure that my next generation is having better life than me? And how we can find solutions. Yes, of course, Fairtrade Premium is one of the solutions, but what we have really seen in most of the villages and cooperatives that we work with is they take Fairtrade Premium, but they go to the local council and demand for a lot of their rights, which has never happened before. So from my perspective, Fairtrade's role is really forming or organizing farmers into a cooperative has much more significant meaning than the Fairtrade Premium that has been paid.
I think that's something that we see very important within fair trade as well, that actually, the history of the fashion industry and of a lot of products that we have are built on exploitation. That's how they originated, that's how they continue. And actually, fair trade is not just about changing the price that people have, it's also about making sure that the power and the voice moves down the supply chain and doesn't just stay at the consumer end of things. And I think that's really important. I think it's really interesting what you say about organizing. That's something that we do in Fairtrade Wales. We're very much about supporting people across Wales who are interested in getting involved in fair trade, who want to raise awareness of it. And we have quarterly meetings, which have been on Zoom for a long time now, really for people to get together and share their ideas and say, oh, I've tried this out, and has anyone tried that? Or I want to do that, but I don't know how. And when you get people together to be able to talk about that, it makes such a difference in people's ability to kind of campaign for their rights and also learn what their rights are. Very often, very often there are things that are in the law that people are protected by, but people just don't know about. So I think that's really, really important aspect of things. Yeah, very much so.
Could I just add quickly that I think it's very interesting to hear about women's role in a fair trade industry in India, but also to say that we're very committed to fair work as well, and fair work in terms of pay and conditions. And I mean, so that is something which is we have to link to ethical a business in every respect, corporate social responsibility. And we are actually developing a social partnership law in Wales, which social partnership and procurement law, which is very much being developed with trade unions and employers. And I hope that actually this is something that Fairtrade Wales will link into, because we need to think about this in terms of procurement. We have a code for ethical supply chains, and so it's again, this is why this is a very much for a government. It's a cross-government responsibility to have that kind of ethical, fair trade, fair work. We have an expression in Wales called chwarae teg, which means fair play. And we work on that basis where we can, fair play.
Yes, that sounds very important.
I think I think procurement is very important. I think it might be nice now to hear from Andy on that thing. Obviously you are working with schools a lot, but also you've recently branched out into SU. So it'd be interesting to hear kind of how do you go about trying to set up an ethical business, and how did you and Ranga, how did you find each other that you were both able to create that ethical supply chain? It'd be interesting to hear.
How long have you got, Aileen? Well, Ranga and I first met each other, I think it was at a fair trade conference about 10, 11 years ago, when Ranga was working at the Fairtrade Foundation in London as the cotton product advisor. And it is a nice story, but it's a story actually of sustainability, and one of how, when you meet in a fair trade environment and you have fair trade intentions, if you like, picking up on Jane's comment about really having to stick at it. So at that time, we had just started working with a factory in Mauritius called Craft Aid. And as Ranga well knows, they were the first factory that gave us a chance in business. We were just even smaller minnows than we are now in the school uniform industry. But what they had was an ethical factory, very good worker treatment, very much like Dibella, and they manufactured very good quality garments for us made with fair trade cotton. Sadly, that factory went under in 2016, and we tried to maintain our manufacturing base over in Mauritius, but it didn't work out. And Ranga contacted me early in 2018 and said, "Hi Andy, I'm in London for a week. How about we get together for a chat?" And our relationship was then born into one of Koolkompany and Dibella working together, and we haven't looked back since. I suppose what we want to do, our mission with our business, is to make sure that the people buying our garments understand all about the length of the supply chain, the number of factories involved, the number of workers involved in making the garments, and the amount of potential for exploitation, both of the cotton farmers and also of the factory workers. And what we're trying to do with the students in schools and universities is show them that you can do it a different way. One of the messages that I put out, first of all, when I do my fair trade assemblies in schools, for example, is I ask the students, is fair trade a charity or a business? And many answer, it's a charity. And of course, no, it's a business. And Ranga, I know you will echo this from the cotton farmers' perspective. Those cotton farmers, they don't want a hand out, they want a hand up. They want to be able to produce their cotton and sell it on fair terms in order to grow their small businesses, as we are trying to do. So I think that's a very important message. And I think sustainability in terms of, we're a company that's been treading a path all around the UK for the last 10, 11 years. Also in Wales, I think our first trip to Wales was in 2011. We now have 10 Welsh schools working, buying Fairtrade uniform from us. We've been into 9 of those 10 schools. The only school we haven't managed to visit yet was Trelec Primary, and that's because of the pandemic. But we've run assemblies and class session in all of those schools. In, for example, Welsh Pool in Mid Wales, St Asaph in Cardiff, Llandudno, Pembrokeshire, 2 schools there, and 3 schools in Monmouthshire. So slowly, schools are beginning to understand that their students need to know where their clothes are coming from and who is making them. And those schools that we're working with are very much pioneering schools, because they're bucking the trend of a very profits-driven market. The school clothing industry is a very profits-driven industry, and obviously it's not fashion, but it's under the same umbrella in terms of of potential for exploitation. So what we're trying to do in our small way, with phenomenal support and if you like, the perfect ethical supply chain through Dibella and Chetna Organic, who work with the cotton farmers, is trying slowly to disrupt that industry and show schools and students that you can do it a different way. The other last thing I would say is prices. When I first contact schools, there's always a tendency on the other end of the phone to think that we're going to be 3 or 4 times the price of conventional school uniform. And that is actually not the case. We're about sort of medium to medium upper price range. So if we can bring garments to market through Ranga and the chain's support, if we can bring garments to market carrying fair trade organic cotton, recycled polyester, with cotton farmers paid fairly and social development projects above and beyond fair trade going on in those communities, and the workforce, the factory workforce, can be paid 25–30% above the minimum wage, roughly. Ranga, is that about right? And we can bring those garments to market here at roughly the same price points as the industry at large. It gives you an idea of the sort of margins that are going on at this end in terms of the profits. And so we're trying to rebalance that equation, if you like, with Ranga's help.
Thank you. That's really interesting to hear kind of how that works. We have worked with you before, yeah, definitely in schools in Wales, and I know you have schools across the UK as well. So we are almost at an end. I have so many other questions I want to ask and hear about. That's definitely that we're unable to cover, I'm afraid. So we've only got a couple of minutes left. So I'd like to ask each person, just as a final point, something from today that they are going to take away with them and consider and think about. And you've got about 30 seconds each, if that's okay. So Ranga, I'll start with you.
Thank you. I think for me, it is more than what I'm taking away, but what I wanted to pass on is actually it is really high time for the consumers to start thinking about what they are consuming, how they are consuming, and how often they are consuming, because that has an impact, direct impact on a marginalized group of communities, whether it is cotton farmers or whether it is textile workers. It has a direct impact on their livelihood because of the climate change and the impact of climate change. So that's what I wanted to say. Please start thinking about what you're consuming and how you are consuming and how often you are consuming and how the products are made. That is very, very important, and what is the environmental and social footprint that products are leaving. So if you are actually using something that is having significant negative environmental and social impact, then you are voting for some companies to be responsible and to make people's life harder. So please don't do it.
Diolch, thank you. Jane.
Yes, I will be sharing this recording with my colleagues in the Welsh Government and discussing with Fairtrade Wales how we can get this strong message over, particularly relating not just to the fashion industry and questions, but also for me wanting to know more actually about the product as well. We haven't really got into that, so that I can, even as a consumer as well as the minister, can make sure that I learn more about, you know, what is the best product and how it's made, the biodiversity issues. This is going to be now the key question for me as we go into Fairtrade Fortnight.
Brilliant, diolch. Andy.
Yeah, just briefly, Aileen, Jane and Ranga, just to you know, to commend the Welsh Government for its support of fair trade, because it really does, at the grassroots level for businesses like us, it makes a huge difference to be able to connect with schools and put across the fair trade message in a country where we know that the government is very supportive of these very, very important social justice and climate change messages. So my thanks.
Brilliant. I think for me, it is once again that fair trade has so many different aspects associated with it, and that it has these minimum values, but then it goes further and beyond, and hearing about that that cooperation and that organisation and actually the changing the industry from the bottom up, I think is really important. So I want to thank everyone for coming today. We have got an event for Fairtrade Fortnight on March the 2nd called Fair Fashion. It's a conversation on fashion, climate and race, and we have tickets on our Eventbrite. And yeah, I want to say diolch yn fawr iawn, and I hope everybody has a nice day, and thank you all for coming.
Thank you. Thank you.